So much of our community work is shaped by a racial equity lens. We're working in communities that are constantly defined by negative statistics, by negative graduation rates for young black men, by rates of crime and violence, poor housing, poor access to housing, poor access to health care. And that is really informed by our history as a country.
But if we can develop and build leaders that already exist in those communities and give them a framework and give them training and technical assistance, then I believe that community change, authentic community change, based on equity, based on undoing racism and dismantling systemic and institutional racism, I think that can truly be sustained in the community.
Inequities tend to really grow in shadows, and part of the work of our community change team is to really shine a light on disparity.
And so in our minds, I think the first step to really being able to be intentional about strategies that address racial inequity are to understand what those inequities are and how they've played out over time. And so that focus, not just on looking at data, but on looking at disaggregated data by race, I think is one of the ways that we really try to encourage folks to wrap their minds around this issue of racial equity.
And the colorblindness attitude really prohibits us from acknowledging the historical struggles and how those historical troubles and struggles play out in the lives of people of color.
To barriers that have prevented African American families from buying homes. And so it's our job as a community change team to understand the history that has informed the current situation and really build on that narrative as we're trying to help the community figure out what kinds of solutions will lead to better outcomes.
Being colorblind means that I don't see your race, I'm only seeing you as a human. That's invalidating the racial heritage and the racial experiences that young man or young woman may have had to go through in order to be where he or she is today.
A word that comes to mind when I think about Freedom Summer is empowerment, right? Folks on the ground, taking action. And I feel like that's the approach that we try to use in our community change team work.
Freedom Summer really represents the power of cross-class and cross-race movements to bring visibility to injustice.
The history of activism and the history of community organizing and the history of resident engagement. I mean, Freedom Summer was all about going into communities and engaging residents and getting them involved.
I think that it's important to recognize that civil rights activists in the South had been organizing for years before Freedom Summer. And so part of the reason they were really able to mobilize national attention is because they had built such a strong local foundation of relationships and networks. And I think that current of really trying to balance local ownership with external resources is something that we strive to achieve all the time.
And I think that is the history of Freedom Summer, building the capacity of people to fight for equity and fight for equality.
So it's not about us parachuting in as technical assistance providers and fixing problems for people. It's really about building relationship and using those relationships to then build capacity in the folks who actually live in those communities so that they too can take action on their own issues as they've defined them. And to me, that sort of resonates with the history and the spirit and the movement that was Freedom Summer. Real folks on the ground doing the work that they think needs to be done and being empowered and supported to get it done right.